What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Minute Channel. And this is gonna be an interesting video, something different I want to talk about regarding Atlus, Persona, Shin Megami Tensei, just things in general. Something that I've been thinking about for a while, but it's pretty hard to talk about because I kind of sometimes don't know how to approach this. I still don't know how to approach it correctly, but let's go ahead and talk about it. So, one of the biggest issues that I have with Atlus in general, or one of the biggest things that I had for a long time, which didn't get me into the Persona series or Shin Megami Tensei in general, that kind of stuff, is because I didn't grow up in America. And well, a lot of the Persona games or Shin Megami Tensei in general were released in America, and many of the other countries out there. One of the biggest things for me was that the games weren't translated in anything other than English, which is a big deal for a lot of people around the world. Now, English is one of the biggest languages, but it's not the biggest one. There's a lot of languages that are also very well spoken around the world, and I was also a young boy, which while I know about Persona and SMT, I didn't really get to play them until so much later in life, but I spoke English and I was able to kind of walk through the games and everything. So this is kind of my subject about it, is the localization and translation of the games. Now, localization and translation are two different things. One of the biggest things is translation is when a game comes to a different country and it gets translated either only text or through complete dub, which is what they do with a lot of Persona games. A lot of Persona games get complete dub. They get voice actors to do the voices, and sometimes they also include the Japanese voice with subtitles and so on, if they want to get a little bit fancy. That's not what a lot of happens in a lot of countries. For example, China only gets the Japanese version of the game with subtitles in Chinese, so they are able to read what's going on and everything like that, which is, I guess, a lower than just being able to actually just experience the entire game by itself and everything like that. The biggest thing in localization, though, is that they don't have to translate or subtitle the game. They can actually just publish the game in a different country in English. Just basically grab the English version of the game that is already being translated elsewhere and bring it in, or they can grab the original Japanese version and just bring it in. I think that's one of the biggest missed opportunities for Atlus right now. For example, I don't know if you knew about this, but Persona 5 didn't do too well on the European market. A lot of people, even if you look at the forums, you can also see people wondering, why didn't Persona did so good in the market in Europe? And the answer is because the game only released in English in Europe, and European countries speaks more than just English. There's a lot of different languages that they speak: French, German, Italian, Spanish. There's some variety of languages that they can speak. Sure, I'm sure a lot of them speak English, but I feel like when you're releasing such a big market like the European market, Latin American market, South Asia, there's so many different languages that don't get translated to. And well, English is a pretty universal language. It's not the biggest language like Chinese. I feel like a lot of these games could be translated into Chinese. Spanish is a really big language too. They could be translated to Spanish too. I often meet people in forums and people that I talk to and everything that know about Persona. They want to get into Persona. They actually, some of them buy the game only to find out the game is not even translated in their language. And I think that's one of the things that is pretty disappointing in a sense, but at the same time is something pretty jarring. For example, the entire Persona series at this point, the Persona 5 game by itself, has sold, I'll say, about 2.7 million copies worldwide. That's a lot of copies for a niche game like Persona 5. The entire Persona franchise has sold over 10,000 million copies. I'm not 10,000, 10 million copies over the lifespan of Persona. So Persona 5 itself was the biggest selling game in the SMT franchise overall. So with these numbers in mind, I do think that they should be starting to think in a global scale instead of just the Japanese market or the American market in a sense, or whatever else, because for example, Europe doesn't even have a publishing company for Europe. There's no Atlus Europe. There is America Atlus, and there is Japanese Atlus, and the rest of the world gets some other publisher, company, third party that are not involved with the project, that don't know nothing about the project, and they publish the game without even knowing. Sometimes I guess the you know, there's a certain threshold what it kind of needs to be crossing to kind of just be able to market the game correctly and everything like that. For example, in Europe, the game was sold by Deep Silver, which again has no involvement in the process or the making of the game. At least with Atlus USA, they have, you know, some connections with Atlus in Japan and that kind of stuff, so they can kind of do that and everything. But I feel like at this point, Atlus being purchased by Sega being a massive big company, I think they should be looking at starting maybe looking into translate a lot of these games, because they are missing into a big market. I mean, RPGs in general are a big market, JRPGs are pretty big too, and overall, I feel like it's such a big market for them to open up to and everything like that, and without just putting that effort into doing it, they are missing opportunity there. One of the other things that I have an issue with while we're talking about translating and stuff like that, I know the American translations are not the best, and there are actually websites dedicated where they talk about the translations and all the issues and that kind of stuff, which in part I don't really fault them for it. I totally understand that translation is difficult. As somebody that do speak many languages, it is a little bit difficult sometimes to translate correctly or anything like that, but a lot of the translations are pretty bad as well. That being said, I do feel like at this point we're getting to a point where Atlus should be publishing these games simultaneously with the Japanese release. It shouldn't be like 6 months down the road or 5 months down the road. For example, the biggest competitor, Square Enix, with the Final Fantasy series, they publish their games at the same time as they do in Japan, as they do in the rest of the world. You know, it's not just Japan, and then 6 months later everybody else gets to experience this game. So I think this is one of those things that they should also work on. But my biggest thing is these games should be getting translated in different countries and languages and being able to experience by different people. I do feel that it's a missed opportunity because world is big, and America isn't, you know, it's a big country, but it's not the market. You know, there's definitely market everywhere, as long as it's marketed correctly and as long as it's translated in the right languages. And I feel like a lot of people are just missing out in a pretty good series like Shin Megami Tensei. I feel like if I had known English when I was younger, knowing about SMT, I could have maybe played those games earlier on, because it is a missed opportunity for people out there not to be able to play them. But yeah, that's pretty much in my video today. Just kind of talking about and rambling about something that I feel is kind of important that isn't always being talked about. It's kind of hard to talk about this kind of stuff because I don't know how to approach it correctly, in the sense that it makes sense for people that are not English speaking, even though I have an English speaking channel, because it's hard to imagine how it will be to play a game without being able to understand it. I guess it will be like playing the Japanese game without knowing anything or seeing subtitles or something like that. Even though English is a very dominating language in the world, you know, it is a big language, a lot of people speak the language, so I guess I get where it's coming from, but I do think the market is much bigger than just English speaking. But anyway, that is pretty much for this video here. Let me know what you guys think about this. Even in the English translation, I don't think it's perfect. I think there's still a lot of work that they could be doing a little bit better on that, and maybe Persona 6 will do much better on translation, that kind of stuff. But we'll touch one thing at a time, I guess. That is pretty much for today, guys. If you're new, please consider liking and subscribing, but I'll see you next time.